Homegoing is a novel that follows the family lineage of two half-sisters. Effia, the first half-sister, is the Fanti wife of the British governor of the Cape Coast Castle, which is a slave castle that still stands in Cape Coast, Ghana. And then the second sister, Esi, is kept in the castle as a slave before being sent to America. So the novel kind of follows 250 or so years of history in both Ghana and America. The book was inspired by a trip that I took to Ghana in 2009. I received a grant from my university, Stanford, to go to Ghana and research a novel. And it was while on this trip that I ended up taking a tour of the Cape Coast Castle myself, and just got to see the entire, kind of lay of that castle, and heard the tour guide talk about the fact that the soldiers who lived and worked in the castle during this time would sometimes marry the local women. And then from there, he took us down to see the dungeons. And I was so struck by the idea that there could be, free people kind of walking above all of these captives who were about to be sent along the Middle Passage. One of the chapters, H's chapter, which is the beginning of part 2, takes place mostly in a coal mining town called Pratt City, after H, the character, has been arrested and sentenced to work in the coal mines under Alabama's convict leasing system. And again, I had grown up in Alabama but knew nothing about this practice that lasted an astonishingly long amount of time in that state and along a lot of different southern states. And so that entire facet of history, the kind of post-Civil War criminalization of Black men, period, in America, was something that I knew very little about, and was really surprised to learn as much as I did. I think specifically just looking at America and a lot of these kind of conversations about race that are still popping up today, things like the Black Lives Matter movement or what have you, I think we can kind of directly link a lot of these moments to these unhealed parts of our history that kind of began with slavery. And so I think there's still a lot of work to be done, and a need to kind of take a longer, deeper, more meaningful look at our history. I suppose if I had to say anything, it's that all of these kind of traumatic moments that we look at in our history, they happened to people, to individuals just like us. And that it's important to not look back on those moments and just think about people as this kind of mass, this kind of faceless mass, to remember to put names and faces to each of these experiences. I actually wrote this book without an outline, but using a family tree that looks a lot like the family tree that's just at the front of the book. So I kind of always knew how many characters I wanted and a little bit about each character, though I didn't know what was specifically going to happen in their lives. But I do feel like I had kind of just kind of the vaguest sense of each of them as I moved, because I had made this family tree first. I think there could have been a way to write this book and have it be black and white, like literally, in terms of people's like moral complicity and moral responsibility or whatever it was. But that didn't interest me as much as kind of trying to create characters who behave in ways that I think that people actually do. I think we have a tendency in the present to kind of look at people in the past as though they were, less smart, less moral than we are. And had I been living in Ghana in the 18th century, I wouldn't have made those same choices. But I think when you actually read the history, you understand that these are people who are just like us, who have the kind of hopes and fears and dreams that we all have, and are also just trying to do the best that they can for their families, and compromising things morally that they shouldn't be. And history kind of, the hindsight kind of gives us the opportunity to look back and say, this was wrong or that was wrong. But I think sometimes when you are stuck in the middle, it's a lot harder to fight for things that are good. And so it was important to me that all of these characters feel morally complicated. You know, I really firmly believe in that Toni Morrison quote, and I'm going to butcher it, but the one about like searching for the book that you wish you could pick off your bookshelf, and if it's not there, then you have to write it. This book was very much, I think, the book that I would have wanted to read when I was a child and had all of these questions about identity and race and ethnicity and those kinds of questions and those kinds of thoughts, I think, all appear in this book. Just having this different ethnic background than most African Americans in America do was something that I thought a lot about when I was a child, particularly because we grew up in predominantly white neighborhoods, and so I didn't really have like a model for, I suppose, how to be Black or what being Black meant in America, aside from, you know, my own family, which had this very different cultural background and historical background than African Americans. And so I think a lot of this book and kind of a lot of my childhood was attempts to kind of discover what Blackness meant for me, what was allowed, and to try to piece that together. I think when you're 12 and trying to just ask the kind of basic identity questions that all of us have, and then have that be complicated by America's kind of racial tension, I think those questions become a lot more difficult than they need be. There's a million different ways to be Black, and they're all right. Home has always been very fluid for me, not just because I immigrated to America at such a young age, but also once we got to America, I lived in several different states before landing in Alabama. And so the idea that home is a place has never really resonated with me. I think for me, home is more about where my family is, where my loved ones are, this thing that you kind of create and that you also bring with you. And I think for these characters, even though they have been torn and fractured in innumerable ways, like home is this big family that they have, even if they don't know it.